Today, I will be giving you my initial thoughts on the 3 new JOOLA Pro IV paddles that will be launching this week. So we've got the Hyperion, the Magnus, and the Scorpius. I've already reviewed the Perseus and the Agassiz. If you check out our website, pickleheads.com, you should see that review there. I absolutely love those paddles, and I loved testing these paddles for a few hours this week. My full review will be up in the next week or two for each one of these paddles, but this is kind of a nice intro to give you an idea of how these paddles feel as they launch this week. So I'll give you a breakdown of sort of the high-level stats of each paddle, as well as my general thoughts on each one, and kind of compare them to each other, as well as other power paddles in the market. If you want the full review and a bunch more content on these paddles, you should subscribe to our newsletter at Pickleheads. The link will be down below. It's a fantastic newsletter. We've got hundreds of thousands of subscribers. We post all of the most important reviews on paddles, like on big launches like these ones, as well as a ton of training videos and just overall pickleball content that everyone loves, and it'll keep you up to date on what's kind of happening in the pickleball world. So definitely check out our newsletter. It's definitely a very good use of time. Last but not least, just to give a brief disclosure, JOOLA did not pay me for this review, does not pay Pickleheads for this review. They sent us these paddles for free to test out, but we do have an affiliate link. If you do end up liking this review and you do end up wanting to buy the paddle, we would love it if you would use that link to help support the page, help support me doing reviews here for Pickleheads. The link will be down below for you to check it out. These paddles, so like I said, we've got the Scorpius here, the Hyperion, and the Magnus. Just some overall, technology that's in all 3 paddles, similar to the Perseus Pro IV that came out. These 3 paddles all have the new TechFlex power technology, which is essentially a fancy way of saying that it helps improve the weight distribution and it helps the paddles feel more consistent and provide more feedback when you're swinging, rather than just kind of like an explosive power paddle that sort of feels like you have no control. And so they added that into the paddle in order to provide more consistency. And that is in all 3 of these paddles. All 3 of these paddles also have the JOOLA propulsion core that was launched, with the 3S and the mod paddles, and that provide that really absorbing and sort of trampoline power that these paddles have. And so these paddles all have that same propulsion core as well. Each of these 3 paddles also come in a 16mm and a 14mm option. Spoiler alert, I highly recommend you get the 16mm. I think it's the better paddle all around for any of these models, including the Perseus and including the Agassiz that came out about a month ago. I just think the 16mm model, not to go on a tangent, just provides more control. And it actually, with the way the propulsion core works, it actually provides more power on drives when you're doing all of the power yourself, because of the way the technology of the JOOLA paddle absorbs that ball and shoots it back. Just as a spoiler, thoughts right off the bat here, I would definitely recommend the 16mm. But if you want more speed and you want the paddle to feel a little bit lighter and have more pop right off the face of the paddle, then the 14mm is a good option for you. All of these paddles will be priced at $279.95. So it's definitely a premium priced paddle. And I do think that these are premium paddles. These are professional grade paddles. And so that's kind of the price you have to pay at this point for top tier power that also has good control like these paddles do. So in terms of the specs of each paddle, so I'll talk about the 2 elongated versions first. So we've got the Magnus here and the Hyperion. So starting with the Magnus is 16.5 inches. So your typical elongated length, 7.5 inches wide. And then the part that makes the Magnus unique is the 5-inch handle. So this is pretty rare. Most paddles these days do not go any lower than a 5.25 or 5.25 inch handle, but a lot of Tyson McGuffin's paddles have always had the 5-inch handle, and so that's kind of the unique feature about the Magnus. And so there's more hitting space. It's supposed to provide more consistency, a bigger sweet spot, this larger hitting area with the shorter handle. The Hyperion here, so again, it's elongated. It's got 16.5 inches long, 7.5 inches wide. This one has a 5.5 inch handle. So you can kind of see, hopefully here in the video, the difference in handle, that little 1/4 inch here. This paddle is very similar to the Perseus. Essentially the only difference is the Perseus is more squared on top here, whereas the Hyperion is more rounded. I believe this is supposed to add more aerodynamics to the Hyperion. I honestly haven't noticed a big difference between the two, but that is sort of the call out of the Hyperion. Last but not least, we've got the Scorpius. So the Scorpius is obviously, as you can clearly tell, different than these ones. This is your standard or wide body shape. It is 16 inches long and 8 inches wide. So you essentially lose a 1/2 inch on the length and you gain it in the width. And then it has a 5 1/4 inch handle. So the handle is kind of in between the Magnus and the Hyperion. And that's supposed to provide much more control and forgiveness and consistent sweet spot than your elongated counterparts. The Magnus is a great paddle. I mean, honestly, I really enjoyed all of these paddles. I felt that the Magnus had a very consistent stroke, especially with the forehand. You know, if you're having that Ferrari forehand like Tyson, likes to call his forehand, and you're driving, big forehand drives, big speed ups at the kitchen, or just want to play a really aggressive game, I think this paddle is a really good option. It does have a little bit more of a bigger sweet spot than the Hyperion or the Perseus. I didn't feel like it was a ton better, but it was better. It did have a little bit of consistent, more bounce around the edges than you do with those options. I would say it's not as consistent as the Scorpius, but you wouldn't really expect that given it being an elongated paddle. I feel like the feedback on this paddle when you're hitting it is really great. I don't love power paddles when it feels like it just launches quickly off the paddle. It's kind of how I feel about some of the gearbox power paddles. This one feels like it's going sort of into the paddle and then shooting out. Feels like you can shape your balls when you're hitting them really hard. Reminds me a lot of the TKOC and those Bantam paddles from PaddleTech. I really enjoyed this paddle and thought that it was a really nice, version of a power paddle. The only gripe I have with it is the handle. I just don't love 5-inch handles. I have not played with a paddle as my main that has a 5-inch handle in a long time. Even on the website, it describes that this is meant for people with a one-handed backhand. Even with a one-handed backhand, I felt that, when I was trying to dink with one hand and do slice dinks, just didn't feel like I had a lot of control and maneuverability with the short handle. And I definitely did not enjoy doing the two-handed backhand that I have with this paddle. If I were to pick, a Pro 4 paddle to play with, it would probably not be the Magnus just because of the handle, honestly. Everything else was fantastic. The small handle is kind of a deal breaker for me. Next is the Hyperion. The Hyperion is a fantastic paddle. I really enjoyed the blend of power and control and just overall sweet spot and forgiveness it has. All of these paddles have a lot of pop to them, including the Hyperion. I mean, it is a power paddle, and so you are going to get that. It does have that pop, but I did feel that the extra foam that they added along the edges of the Hyperion and all of these does help with that forgiveness. That just helps you keep it from, having big pop-ups that get, smashed down on you. I enjoyed this paddle a lot. I thought, similar to my notes on the Magnus, it has really nice feedback when you attack the ball hard, has great spin. I feel like you can really dip either drops, drives, kind of 50% drives where you're just not hitting as hard as you can, you're trying to get more shape. All of that is really possible and really smooth with this paddle. If I were to pick an elongated paddle of all of the launches, it would probably be either the Hyperion or the Perseus over the Magnus. Really enjoyed this paddle. If you like elongated paddles and you want a power one, I think this is a great option. And last but not least, we've got the Scorpius, which was my favorite paddle of the three, and honestly my favorite paddle of the entire Pro 4 launch. I am a sucker for wide body paddles. I think I'm sort of an outlier in sort of the circles I play with, that I enjoy the wide body paddles. I don't know if it's because I come from a ping pong background rather than tennis, but I find that a lot of my shots end up being here in sort of that center of the paddle, which standard shape paddles ends up being the sweet spot, which is awesome. But if you kind of layer that onto an elongated paddle, the sweet spot is more up here rather than down here, and so that's why I love standard shape paddles. and this is a fantastic paddle. It may be my new main paddle. This may have replaced the ESQ for me. I'm gonna give it a couple more hours and see how I feel. I've only played with it a few sessions. Historically, the ESQ has been my #1 paddle for the same reasons why I love this one, because it has a good level of power, all the power that you need to put points away and to be aggressive, but it has a really consistent bounce off of what feels like the entire paddle. It feels like I can hit the ball anywhere on the paddle and it'll at least have a somewhat consistent bounce, let alone if I go anywhere here, I'm drilling that ball and it's gonna have a really nice bounce. I like standard shape paddles for that reason. I also feel like they're a little faster at the kitchen. I like to be defensively aggressive, if that makes sense, where I like when people speed up to me and I counter downwards and score points that way more than I score speeding up on other people. And so I feel like this paddle was really good at that. It was fast at the kitchen. It had all the pop and the power that you needed in order to be aggressive, as well as be able to dink and reset and control the pace of the game, even in a soft style game. Really, really, really liked the Scorpius. I'm excited to do my full review on it. Initial thoughts is it's an absolute win. It's a top tier wide body paddle. From everyone I've talked to, including my own experience, it does feel like the promise of more stability and consistency with the extra foam around the edges of the paddle. It has worked right now so far. Those reviewers like Pickleball Effect and other people who review the actual twist weight of the paddle, it doesn't seem like the twist weight is going up a ton with these models. In terms of feel, I do feel like it does add extra stability. I even had one comment today from someone I was playing with that has a lot of experience with both paddles, felt that the weight he puts on his Hyperion 3S essentially was replicated out of the box with the Hyperion Pro 4. And so I don't know if there's a better review than that, a better, a more positive way to word that than that description, but that is the consensus I've been getting, as well as how I've been feeling. I do feel like these do add a nice level of forgiveness that the 3S lacked on. And the power is very comparable. In my own experience, I felt that they're pretty similar. The 3S maybe hits a little bit harder, but not a lot. And I think you can win points very easily with either model. And so having that forgiveness is honestly the reason why I am seeing a lot more high-level players. So, players that I see around the clubs I play at that are 5'5", close to 6.0 level players that have all been shifting towards paddles like the PaddleTech TKOC. They are now playing with these Pro 4 paddles, and I think it's because of that extra forgiveness. They all had, the option to play with the 3S, and they weren't playing with them. And this extra level of forgiveness, I believe, is the reason. And you're still able to have all that power that you wanted. In terms of an upgrade, I think they did succeed. I think JOOLA absolutely succeeded in upgrading that paddle, and it's just a total win. How do these compare to other power paddles? I would say none of the Pro 4 launch paddles, so including the Perseus and including the Agassi, none of them hit as hard as the TKOC or the Gearbox Pro Power that just launched. In terms of full power potential, they don't hit as hard, but I don't really think that's a bad thing. I think the TKOC is a great paddle in terms of being able to hit at the highest of levels in power while still having some control. And I think the Gearbox paddles lean a little bit too much towards power and I think struggle with that control. Whereas I think these are a very nice balance of power and control. And so you lose that little bit of power, but you gain it back in the forgiveness and the ability to be able to more shape your power and be able to, almost tame it in a way where it's a weapon and not just a pure blunt force trauma paddle attacking your opponent. If I were to pick an elongated paddle, so for example, if I wanted to compare the Gearbox Pro or the TKOC compared to one of these, I would probably take the Perseus or the Hyperion over those paddles. I just think that they're a better blend of power control and the spin is very comparable. And the terms hand speed and all of that, I think are very comparable. And so I think these are an absolute winner to start 2025. Really great launch from from JOOLA. Are they worth the price? I think my last comments absolutely would confirm that it is. If you are a serious player that wants to play with a premium paddle, these are a really great option. It's obviously top tier pricing, $280 essentially. It's absolutely worth it. It's really hard to get this level of power and feel and consistency and spin for any less. There are paddles that are cheaper that provide a good amount of power, but they don't kind of have the whole package that these paddles have. And so definitely think if you're a tournament player, you're a more serious player, you want to have a premium product, these paddles are definitely worth the price. Thanks everyone for watching. Like I said, I'm going to be doing my review of all of these paddles over the next week or two. So check out pickleheads.com. You'll see my full written review of these paddles. Again, subscribe to the newsletter. We'll most likely be posting the review on these paddles on that newsletter. We love to highlight the biggest launches of the year. So if you want to stay on top of everything new in pickleball, please subscribe to our newsletter and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more reviews from me. Thanks, everyone.